Peace to everybody tuning in to another addition to the Bible in Plain View. Our reader today is Brother Wayne, and my name is Brother Cephas. I'll be providing you with another lesson this month. The conversation or the lesson for today is the weapons of Satan, and this is an opportunity that I wanted to take to just go over, a few things that Satan likes to do. I actually didn't include this in here, but if you read in Galatians chapter 5, it talks about all the works of the flesh. He says the works of the flesh are manifest. And he goes through just a list of different things that when you operate according to the world, you can see yourself lining up with those character traits. Especially as we approach the end of time, which we are in right now, but it's just ramping up more and more with each new year that the Lord allows this world to go by and to go on. And when that's the case, guess what? Evil is going to be at an all-time high. So that's why you got to come back and put judgment on this earth and correct things and get things back on track, right? But all we're seeing in this world is all the different devices, all the different tools that Satan has put in place for us to be able to operate according to our flesh, right? But simple things within our minds, within ourselves, that we can actually look at to help us not be a tool for Satan, for us to not be able to be moved by Satan. Hey, it's written in this Bible. The brother before me talked about an acceptable service unto the Lord, offering sacrifice that are right unto the Lord. And in order for you to be able to do that, it's going to require some humility. But when you're dealing with Satan, the opposite of humility is pride, which is what we're going to be touching on today. Today's lesson is the weapons of Satan, pride. Because Satan himself is puffed up, right? He is the most puffed up person you could think of. Even when you read, I want to say in Isaiah chapter 14, he was considered, an angel of high esteem in God's kingdom, right? Ezekiel 28 lets you know that he was made up of all these different precious stones, and he was beautiful, but iniquity is found in him at some given point, right? And he got puffed up in his mind where instead of he being the creation and giving reverence unto God, he wanted to be God himself. He got puffed up to where he wanted to be served. He wanted to be in the seat of God. That's what it tells you in Isaiah chapter 14. That's why it says, "Oh, how art thou fallen, O Lucifer, son of the morning." Right? Because you had your place and you was good, but because of the pride in your mind, because you lifted up yourself, guess what? Now you are going to be brought down low. And Jesus says that even in accordance to man's every day. He says, listen, whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased. But whosoever shall abase himself, who's willing to be humble, they're going to be exalted when it's all said and done. But understand this, because pride is in Satan's mind, pride is in Satan's heart, he's going to use that same tactic when it comes to mankind. Because guess what? Mankind is the same exact way. We've been puffed up, right? Especially when we living in a generation where, hey, we have all these different devices. We have all this information. We have all this technology to where, hey, we are not so dependent on, the elements anymore. Hey, we got running water. We got utilities. We got electronics. Everything is at our fingertips. I don't even have to drive. I don't have to kill no animal, right? I don't even got to drive to a grocery store. I just pull up an app on my phone, and guess what? I'll have groceries at my house in like 45 minutes. What do you think that'll do to a man's mind year after year after year when you don't feel like you need to depend on God? Guess what? You are going to get puffed up. But that is just a device of Satan. That is a weapon of Satan to keep you separated from the Lord. And mind you, he's puffed up himself. Let's just take a look at that. That's where we're going to start our lesson, Job chapter 41. Just looking at Satan's characteristics, and because there's pride in him, understand this. If there's pride that exists in you, he's going to work on that pride. He's going to exercise that pride to bring out disobedience in you and separate you from the Lord. See, when you understand the weapons of the enemy, you'll be able to deflect them because it's not anything physical. that the enemy is using. And when we say enemy, we talk about Satan, his angels, right? His demons. When you understand what weapons he's using, and it's not physical weapons, they're spiritual weapons, they're mental weapons, guess what? Now you can be mindful in situations, well, let me just make sure I'm not operating in pride here. This may seem a bit extreme. Let me just revisit this conversation. Let me just go back to this brother or sister or whatever. Let me just make sure I'm operating in humility, because if there's any form of pride there, hey, I could be in trouble. Because again, pride is a silent killer. You don't have to physically see it. It's in your mind. So it's much harder to check. And it's about going against what you think is right, especially when it's contrary to what is right. But we're just going to look at Satan real quick. Understand, hey, that's his mentality, pride. And we're going to see how this applies to mankind as well. So Job chapter 41, and we're going to pick it up at verse 15. We're going to read one verse and jump down to 34. Job 41, verse 15. When you get there, go ahead and read, please.
His scales are his pride.
Right, his scales are his pride, right? See, think about a man. When God is looking at the sons of God, when he's looking at those who's trying to serve him, he wants you to put on a cloak of humility. You know, even a woman, he said you should have the ornament of the spirit of meekness, right? Right? You want to have a humble and contrite heart. These are the characteristics that someone serving God should look like. But look at Satan. His scales, right? Because Satan is likened unto a snake, a serpent. Revelations 12, verse 9, it tell you that Satan, right? He deceived the whole world. And it likened him unto a dragon. It says, and the dragon was cast out of heaven, that old serpent, the devil, called Satan. Right? So if he's likened unto a serpent, what does a serpent or what does a snake have? Scales. So guess what? Verse 15, it says, his scales are his what?
Pride.
His pride. Go ahead.
Shut up together as with a closed seal.
Nothing getting past these scales. It's closed shut. Right? It's like, remember you had that little toy back in the day where you put two fingers on the end, you try to pull it, your finger's stuck, can't get out? Right? That's how his scales are just shut together. Nothing's getting through. But jump down to verse 34. That's what we wanted to come here for.
He beholdeth all high things.
He beholdeth all high things because he's high-minded. He's puffed up, but go ahead.
He is a king over all the children of pride.
He is a king over all the children of pride. See, you read Isaiah chapter 57, verse, I want to say 15, where it says that, thus saith the high and lofty one, talking about God. He says, I dwell in eternity with him also, because we got the Father and the Son, right? With him also that is of a humble and contrite spirit. See, God is humble. The Creator is humble, right? He ain't got to flex. He ain't got to talk about how powerful he is. He's just a humble guy. But you got this creation here whose life is finite because his death is set for him. He's going to experience a living death when it's all said and done. He's puffed up in his mind, and guess what? It says right here, he is beholding all high things, and he is a king over all the children of pride. So you got this being here. We don't see him because they're under chains of darkness. That's what I believe 2 Peter 3 or 2 Peter 2 tell you, one of the two. Say that they are reserved under judgment, and they under chains of darkness. You can't see them. But they have the ability to just pull on your heartstrings a little bit. Let's go over to our next spot. We're going to elaborate a little bit on that. James chapter 1, I'm going to pick it up at verse 13. They're going to pull on their heartstrings because it's not like they can't force you to do anything. Right? These angels, these evil spirits, they're not going to force you to do anything. All they're going to look for is the iniquity that is already in you, and they are going to captivate on that. James chapter 1. When you get to verse 13, go ahead and read that.
Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God.
See, we can't ever say at any point that God has tempted us to do anything. You know, the Lord will allow you to go through some tests in life, right? Because these tests are supposed to groom you to be better people or to get that evil out of you, because he's going to allow things to fall apart if you can't get your act together, right? But you can never at any point say, oh, well, the Lord made me do this. The Lord made me do that. No, he didn't. You make your decisions at the end of the day, right? I'm still looking for James 1, verse 13, right? So read that again.
Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God.
It says, let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. Go ahead.
For God cannot be tempted with evil.
Because God don't deal with evil like that. Now, we understand Isaiah 45 says God created both good and evil, but he himself don't operate in evil. He allow mankind to make their decisions, whether it be good or evil. He's a fair God. And at the end of the day, if you want to operate in evil, hey, you have that privilege. Just understand there's a reward for that. But if you want to operate in evil, it's because the evil is inside of you. And Satan, all he does is he just sets the right conditions for you so that when you in that situation, you're going to fall into mischief. Right? Because Proverbs tells you, a righteous man, he falls 7 times, but he's going to get back up. But what does the wicked do? They're going to fall into mischief. Why? Because that evil is already in them. It says right here, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man, but what? Verse 14.
But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust.
It says, but every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust. And what?
And enticed.
And enticed. Why are we going here? Because guess what? To some degree, all man got a little bit of pride in them, and we got to check ourselves every day. Some more than others, some less than others, but guess what? All it takes is that one time, that one situations, and for the conditions to be just right, and it can come out. And it is your job every day that you get up to make sure you're not operating in that pride. Because it can exist. You can eliminate it. Give it some time, and it can try to creep back up. Unbeknownst to you, right? But when it presents itself, you just got to keep it at bay. You got to resist it, because ultimately you resisting the devil, because the devil, he operates in pride. So if you got it in you, hey, he just going to exercise it. But it says right here, but every man is tempted when he is drawn away of what?
His own lust.
See, that pride already exists in you. What happens next? And enticed. See, again, the conditions have been met. The setting has been put for you to just jump right in and exercise that pride. Verse 15.
Then when lust have conceived.
Now that you done operating the pride, you know, you said what you done said, you did what you done did, that you shouldn't have, because, you know, a lot of times we try to justify our behavior based off what someone else does or what someone else may say. We say, oh, well, you should have said that. I understand, right? Hey, me and my wife, we have grown to such a healthy place, right? But we've had conversations where, hey, I may have said something that may have rubbed her the wrong way, or vice versa. It don't got to be husband and wife. It can be between friends. It can be between strangers. That's how I can relate to the situation, because I've experienced it myself. But regardless of what the person says or does, you can't come before the Lord and say, oh, well, they shouldn't have done that. Yeah, the Lord going to deal with them, because they wrong. They're not justified for their behavior, but neither are you. And that's what you need to understand. That's why you got to cut out that pride, because your pride is going to make you think that you're entitled to you operating that way. And when you do that, we're going to see later in this lesson, hey, pride comes before destruction. You're going to end up getting in trouble anyway. So you might as well just humble yourself and don't allow Satan to pull in that pride in your heart. Because it says right here, verse 15, then when lust has conceived, what does it do?
It brings forth sin.
It brings forth sin. You don't let Jesus die for your sins and give you a clean slate. Now you don't put sin back on you. Why? Because you want to operate in pride. You're back in trouble again. You done woke up the sleeping giant, right? Because the Lord coming to bring judgment. It says, then when lust has conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and what else?
And sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death.
And sin, when it is finished, it bringeth forth death. You don't woke up the sleeping giant, now he got to get to work on you. Now he got to beat you upside your head, because the Lord, he going to chastise those he loves. right? I'd rather be going through a situation because I'm trying to learn something and get better than going through something because I done pissed off the Lord and now he got to correct me. There's two types of chastisement the Lord can put on you. And let it be the first rather than the later, because you're going to get chastisement regardless. And best believe you're going to get corrected in this life regardless. But as you continue to age and you want to be a better Christian, guess what? You want to minimize the amount of correction you need to get because you can't get your act together. And one of the things that we definitely need to keep at bay is pride. Because again, this is an instrument of Satan. Let's go over to Genesis chapter 4. Let's look at an example. This brother just went there in his previous lesson, but we're going to go there again. Because Cain was not providing a good sacrifice. Right? But the Lord is fair. We're going to see God is so fair. Even when you out of pocket, when you out of bounds, he going to sit down. He going to have a talk with you. He going to let you know what's going on. And he's going to give you the opportunity to get it right. But we're going to see an individual who had pride in his heart and chose not to correct his behavior. Because, again, when you have pride in your heart, you feel like you're good. You feel like you shouldn't have to change. You know, again, we've heard this saying in the world all our life. People love to say, well, that's just who I am. Well, understand this. Who you are is going to end you up in the lake of fire. Who you are is going to end you up in trouble. Who you are is going to end up making you lose your relationships, damaging your relationships, right? It's going to end you up getting beat down because you smart at the mouth, right? Who you are is going to get you in a lot of trouble, and it's your pride that keeps you there. So you got to be able to be humble and break out of that mold and be a new individual so you don't get caught up in the ways of the world and really end up in a worse situation than you are right now. But Genesis chapter 4 and verse 4, when you get there, go ahead and read, please.
And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock.
I'm sorry, we really need to be at verse 3, but it says, read verse 3.
And in process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord.
Because Adam knew his wife Eve. She bore a son that was Cain. That was, I believe, her firstborn, right? And then she had Abel, who came later on. Abel was a keeper of the sheep. Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in process of time, it says that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. Verse 4.
And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof.
So however you read it, in God's eyes, understand the Bible says God is no respecter of person. He says that God is not mocked. Whatsoever you sow, you're going to end up reaping. And the Lord looks at everybody on the same playing field. So evidently, Abel's offering was far superior than Cain's. And even when you read it, it says in verse 4, it says, verse 3, it says, in process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. Just sound mad regular. He just brought some fruit unto the Lord, right? But then verse 4 says, and Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. It sounds a bit juicier. There's a little bit more to it. It ain't just a regular offering, right? So Cain can look at Abel like, dang, he really giving the best of the best. Maybe I could step my game up and do it like him, you know? Even though especially because, hey, he the older brother too, right? So that could be another thing playing. Because saying he looking for avenues to play with you in your head. Like, oh, you going to let your little brother outshine you like that, bro? You going to let your little brother do you like that, bro? Yeah, he giving the fat thereof of these lands, bro. You giving these little, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't let Satan play you, though, because he's looking for that pride. Because that's a weapon of his. It says, in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering to the Lord, and Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And what it say?
And the Lord had respect unto Abel and his offering.
Go ahead.
But unto Cain and to his offering he had no respect.
So you said, Abel, good job. Cain, try again. This is not good enough. And how did Cain respond to that? Go ahead.
And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell.
So instead of Cain saying, you know what, Lord, you're right. Let me get back out there. You know what? I really just threw something together. Let me go back out there. Let me get you the best of the best. Right? Instead, it says right here, Cain was very wroth and his countenance fell. And another thing you got to be careful is that pride a lot of times ends up to anger. And when you got anger, like pride is a silent killer, anger is like some alcohol. Because once you drunk off that anger, you start doing things you thought you was that strong. You thought you could just fight anybody in the club. Guess what? You're going to get stomped out. Right? It's going to make you making decisions that you wouldn't have done if you were sober-minded. Right? If you were conscious of the situation and really humbled yourself to realize, you know what? I ain't really about that life. I really shouldn't make that decision. But it says right here, and Cain was wroth, and his countenance fell, verse 6.
And the Lord said unto Cain, why art thou wroth?
Right.
And why is thine countenance fallen?
So now God decided, you know what? Let me just intervene real quick, because I can already see it all. Let me just make sure that let me at least make an extra measure to make sure I can keep him at bay. Why are you upset? Because God already know, but you got to at least have the conversation with him. Keep reading.
If thou dost well, shalt thou not be accepted?
Yeah.
And if thou dost not well, sin lies at the door.
So, and that's the thing. Hey, you have the privilege of getting your act together. God is no respecter person. If you get it together, hey, I would accept you. Abel doing it, your little brother doing it, you should be able to do it too. Go ahead.
And unto thee shall be his desire.
Yeah.
And thou shalt rule over him.
And that's why you want to be careful, because once you give into that sin, once you get in, especially pride, Satan will get a hold of you. And he'll be able to get you to do whatever you want, whatever he wants, because that's a weapon of his. So you want to use your members, like I tell you, Romans chapter 6, as instruments unto righteousness and unto God. But if you operate in the flesh, you really keeping your members onto sin and onto death, and ultimately you being a foot soldier for Satan. Because he's the one that you're going to follow when it comes to the works of the flesh. And it says right here, if thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted. If thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. So you got an option. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. Verse 8.
And Cain talked with Abel, his brother.
Yeah.
And it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and slew him.
Why? Because of that pride in his heart. His pride didn't allow him to correct himself and say, you know what, let me not do what I'm doing. Let me just do better. No, instead, I'm going to be a crab in a bucket. I'm going to be stuck in my ways. And instead, this dude doing good, I'm going to just be a hater. Like Kendrick Lamar said to Dre, let me tell you right now, I'm the biggest hater. Right? Cain was a hater. And now he operating according to the wicked one. So much so, it start with pride, it lead to anger, and now he a murderer. But let's keep going. Let's go over to Proverbs 16. And after that, we got two more verses. Proverbs 16, and we're going to read verse 18. Because Cain was good. All he had to do was follow the instructions of the Lord. He didn't have to, kill Abel. Thank you, sir. He didn't have to do anything. He just had to just follow the instructions of the Lord. And the Lord gave him an opportunity. Like it said in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13, the Lord always going to give you a way out. Hey, I see your conscience falling. I see that wrath in you. I actually got one more spot that I didn't put on here. I didn't print it out. But Proverbs 16 and verse 18. Let's see what really happened to Cain. He was good. Proverbs 16 verse 18. What's that say?
Pride goeth before destruction.
Pride goeth before destruction. Because if you keep reading Genesis 4, hey, Cain was cursed at that point. God disinherited him. He ain't no longer no son of God. When you read in Sons of God in the book, I believe either Matthew or Luke, you don't see Cain there. Instead, John, he tell you he's of that wicked one. Why? Because he hated his brother. And it was that pride that wouldn't allow him to change and do better. Instead, he wanted to stay the same and just be a hater. And he ended up killing his brother. But pride goes before what?
Destruction.
Yeah.
And an haughty spirit before a fall.
And a haughty spirit before a fall. Chapter 29 and verse 23. Proverbs 29 and verse 23. What's that say?
A man's pride shall bring him low.
It says a man's pride shall bring him low. And that's what happened with Cain. Hey, that's what happened with Saul. Because Saul was made king. He was the first king over it. We didn't read about him, but you can read about him in 1 Samuel chapter 15 and so forth. Really, 1 Samuel 12 and so forth. He was the first king. And even Saul, when Samuel came to Saul because he went against the command of the Lord and didn't wipe out the Amalekites, the Lord spoke to him like, hey, man, when you was little in the sight of everybody else, I raised you up. I made you king. But instead, you decided to despise my commandment. And when Samuel tried to correct you, you justified yourself. You was operating in pride. And you thinking because you saved some animals so you can sacrifice later that I'll be happy? No. Obedience is better than sacrifice. But again, it's your pride that be making you want to stay the same instead of correcting yourself and changing. And who's behind all that? Satan. Because that's his weapon, y'all. So if you don't want to be used for Satan, you got to eliminate that pride. And how do you eliminate that pride? Read the rest of that.
But honor shall uphold the humble in spirit.
See, you're going to have honor if you humble in spirit. See, that's the contrary side of pride. That's the opposite side. That's the other side of the spectrum. You operating in humility. Because God, you read it, I believe in James chapter 4, he tell you that he gives grace unto the humble, but he resists the proud. Yeah, he leave the proud alone because God being all-knowing, God being the creator and being the most high, and we just finite beings thinking we know something, the person with the actual knowledge looking at the person who think he knows something like, I can't do nothing with you because you set in your ways. But guess what? You want to be set in your ways? Somebody looking for you. Somebody say, I can use him. That person is Satan. See, a man's pride shall bring him low. See, Satan going to use you. He going to bring you lower. And ultimately, you operating in pride, it's going to end you up in that lake of fire. But honor shall uphold the humble in spirit. You basically offset that pride by being willing to just take a second to think in every situation and say, you know what, let me make sure I'm not operating in pride. Like James tell you in chapter 1, he said in James chapter 1, verse 19 and 20, he says, be slow to wrath, right? Be slow to speak, but be swift to hear. Because the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God, right? And we're not going to go to Ecclesiastes. I had it in here. Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 9 to tell you that, the anger. It said, be not hasty to be angry because anger resteth in the bosom of fools, right? Because understand, just like anger can rest in your bosom, and really you're a fool because you think that it's not going to be to your detriment. But understand, pride can rest in your bosom as well. All these different emotions can be rested and really just festering in your mind. And let's go over to our last spot, Romans chapter 12. All these different thoughts can be festering in your mind. All these different emotions, especially pride. And Jesus, he told you in Matthew chapter 15, he told you about how, it's not what goes into a man that defiles him, but what comes out. Because what comes out of you, it really come out of your heart. You got blasphemies, you got lies, you got adultery. All sins come from the heart. It starts in the mind first, just like pride. So your heart is corruptive, pride is operating there. And all Satan got to do, he's just going to set the perfect conditions, because again, he can't force you to do anything. He's just going to set the conditions right, so that way you can let it come out of your heart. But if you got that pride resting in your bosom, festering in your mind, it's going to come out. So you have to constantly be getting that pride out of yourself. So our last place, Romans 12, we're going to read one verse, verse 3. When you get there, go ahead and read, please.
For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think.
Because that's what Satan did. Iniquity was found in him because he got puffed up. He said he wanted to be like the Most High. He wanted to be God. And the Lord has to abase him. Now he under chains of darkness, just waiting for the judgment. They're going to be hitting the lake of fire. Their judgment is set in stone. Right? Just like Satan is puffed up, you don't want to be puffed up. Because if you got that pride in you, Satan, he's going to have a field day pulling it out of you. In every situation, in every encounter. To where he's just going to continue to bring you low. For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but what?
But to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith.
Hey, man, stick with some sense. Right? The Lord ain't giving you more than you can bear. He gives some battles to others, and some great, some small. Right? But you yourself, whatever is on your plate, just deal with that. And be diligent over what the Lord give you. And if you're faithful over that, the Lord can give you a little bit more. Be diligent with that. And so forth until he gets you to where he wants you to be. But don't you think that you are more than what you are at any given time. Because at that point, now you're allowing pride to come in. And what did Paul say in 1 Corinthians, I believe, verse 6? He says, a little leaven, leaveneth the whole lump. Just a little pride is going to get you out of character. So you want to keep it at bay so you can resist the devil because he's coming at you. Then this is one of his weapons. So the lesson, the weapons of Satan, what we talked about pride, I hope somebody got some understanding.